Hi, Chand. Always good to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Ripasa, and hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on this show today. And hopefully, we will have a very, very productive session. Especially, we have people with various non immigrant visas, H1s, F1s, L1, various other visas. And the most important thing is you cannot overstay in US. Everybody, whoever is a legal non immigrant in US, they have to follow the rules of their visa, whatever is their particular visa. And a part of the requirement is you can stay in the country only as long as you're allowed, and everybody has a requirement. If somebody's on F1, they have certain requirement how long they can stay in the country. If somebody's on H1, they have a specific requirement how long they can stay in the country to avoid any future issues. So I think hopefully we will discuss various issues with various the more popular visa classes.
How do so many people assume that they still have 60 days left, when their I-94 has already expired and their grace period is actually zero?
Sure. So when we're talking about the 60-day grace period, typically it is for a lot of work visas, especially the H1B. So the general rule that a lot of people think is whenever they're out of a job, they automatically have 60 days left. And this rule comes with a lot of restrictions. And what we are seeing is we are seeing a lot of NTAs, notice to appears, being issued for a lot of people because not everybody has the 60-day grace period. And there are certain limitations on the 60-day grace period, especially when it comes to H1B. And I think you're right. A lot of people assume that when they're on H1B, they just lose their job. They automatically have 60-day grace period. That is not always true. So the first and the foremost thing, like you said, is the I94. Everyone should always check their I94. So I94 is the drop dead date on when somebody has to leave the country. So nobody can exceed their I94 date. And what that means is if somebody just lost their job, usually the general consensus is yes, somebody has 60 days of grace period. But there is a small caveat. And the first and the foremost thing is I94. Everybody has to always check their I94. The 60-day grace period is applicable only if the I94 is still valid. So if somebody's I94 is expiring, say after 30 days, they lost their job, they only will have 30-day grace period, not really 60 days. So you cannot exceed your I94 end date. So you always have to look at what your I94 says, and everybody should know how to check their I94 because there is a lot of confusion on I94. When you come into the country, whenever the Customs and Border Patrol inspects you, they give you a I94 and you can download that I94 online. You can go to the CBP website, you can look at your I94 and there is that I94. And then when people are doing a H1B transfer or H1B extension and so H1B amendment and so on, USCIS in their approval copy will also issue an I94, and that I94 does not get updated on the CBP website. So everybody should know that there is a USCIS I94 in some cases, and then you have the CBP I94. And there is something called last action rule. And what the last action rule says is when you have two different agencies give you a I94, maybe in this case CBP and USCIS, the last action rule always says that whatever is the most recent action, the last action, you have to take a look at that I94. And that I94 is the I94 that you have to follow. And unfortunately, what we are seeing is a lot of people sometimes just look at their CBP I94. And if they have another action, a last action from a recent I797 approval, they sometimes don't see that I94 or vice versa. So, and they get confused. So everyone should always know that you should be looking at the most recent I94, whether it is CBP or whether it is USCIS. The most recent I94 is what dictates your status in the country. And do not ever miss that part because people forget to check the I94. So always check your CBP I94, always check your USCIS, maybe in the approval copy, the 797 I94. Always see what is the most recent one and use that as your I94 end date. If in doubt, always check with your employer or with your attorney because you cannot miss that. If you ever even accidentally miss that I94, you overstay your I94, you could have a bar in the future. You cross 180 days, you'll have a mandatory bar. So the bottom line is the 60-day grace period is only valid if your I94 is still valid.